Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us in commemorating World Alzheimer's Day. My name is Neda, and I will be your MC for this morning. And I will start with some housekeeping points followed by some acknowledgements. So for housekeeping, please, your mobiles, you know what to do with them. So just pop them on silent. Facilities for this building are through the back door and to the left in case you need to use them. The exit doors for an emergency are the two side doors, and our muster point is the oval across the road, so just out that way. Hopefully that won't be needed. I would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Noongar land and to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land and their elders past and present. I thank our sponsors today, the WA Multicultural Lions Club, Alzheimer's Research Australia, and the Melville Baha'i community. Also a warm welcome and thank you to the audience today and to those of you who are on live stream for taking the time to join us for this forum as we all collectively learn more about Alzheimer's. We have a number of distinguished guests here today, and I would like to acknowledge and thank them for their attendance. First of all, apologies from our Premier and Honorable Dr. Parwinder Kaur, MLC, who is on her way representing him. Also, welcome to Councillor Shen Sekon, representing the Mayor, Patrick Hall of the City of Canning. And apologies from Councillor Terry Lee and Sam Lim. Also a very warm welcome to the Portuguese Consulate, Mr. John De Silva. Welcome. Professor Vicky Vass, the CEO of Alzheimer's Research Australia. And of course, I would like to acknowledge our special guest and keynote speaker, Professor Ralph Martins, AO and Head of Research at Alzheimer's Research Australia, for graciously accepting our invitation to present today. More about him in just a little bit. So today's event is part of a quarterly series of mental health and well-being forums, where we explore relevant topics with the help of experts in the field. The program today will be video and audio taped, and the material will be shared on the Mind and Soul Matters podcast series, and some of the photos will be shared on our social media platforms. Before our keynote address, I would like to invite Professor Vicky Vass from Alzheimer's Research Australia to the podium to share a little bit about what this organization does. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. On this World Alzheimer's Day, we pause to acknowledge the immense challenge that dementia presents for those diagnosed, for their families, for carers, and of course, our wider community. Dementia is now, and this is news from just last week, the leading cause of disability and death worldwide. It was announced last week that it was the number one now for men in Australia as well as women. But even in the face of this challenge, there is hope, because the work we are doing together gives us that hope. At Alzheimer's Research Australia, our mission is ambitious but clear: to make Alzheimer's a distant memory. We lead pioneering research into prevention, diagnosis, and treatment, developing simple blood tests for early detection, running clinical trials of promising therapies, and forging partnerships with universities, with pharmaceutical companies, and diagnostic leaders worldwide. And all this happened right here in Perth. This ensures that Australians can become among the first to access these new breakthroughs. At the centre of all of this are people. Our participants who give their time with extraordinary generosity, our scientists, and of course Ralph leads our scientists, and our clinicians who dedicate their careers to solving this disease. And of course, our community of donors and supporters. I think it's important to recognise that at Alzheimer's Research, we don't receive any government funding. And every discovery, every trial, and every family that we support is possible only because of the generosity of people who believe in our mission. One of our proudest initiatives is the upcoming ARA Memory Hub. This is where science and care will come together. It will unite research, clinical trials, and memory services, giving families world-class support and access to the latest innovations when they need it most. We are looking to open this early next year, so watch this space, as they say. So today, on World Alzheimer's Day, let's honour those who are living with dementia, remember those who we have lost, and recommit to building a future defined by dignity, discovery, and above all, hope. Together, we can change the story of Alzheimer's disease. Just before I hand back, what I would like to share with you is, not many people realise this, and I know that he will be embarrassed because I'm about to say it, but we actually have one of the world-leading researchers in Alzheimer's disease right here in Perth, in Professor Martins. And he's so humble. And he doesn't shout about it, so I'm going to. So it is an absolute joy and pleasure to work with Ralph and his many teams of researchers, and something that I take joy in every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vass. Such important work that Alzheimer's Research Australia is doing, and we are very fortunate to have you all here today. I would like to now invite Dr. Charanjit Singh, representing the WA Multicultural Alliance Club, and our co-sponsor for today, to please come up and introduce Professor Martins. So please.
Thank you, Neda. Good morning, everybody. Before I proceed any further, likewise, I would like to also pay my respects to the custodians of the land, elders past, present, and emerging. I am extremely delighted and honored to be given the opportunity to introduce not only the distinguished and prominent Professor Ralph Martins, but as you very rightly said, he's an extremely humble person, and his genuine rapprochement and his personality blends very beautifully in the manner and fashion in which he conducts international research. Let me say a little bit more about him. I know he's going to be perhaps saying, oh no, you don't need to say all this, but I think it needs to be said. Professor Ralph Martins is an internationally recognized leader in Alzheimer's disease and research in that field. He co-founded the landmark Australian Imaging Biomarkers and Lifestyle, in brackets AIBL. Those who are scientifically minded, you might remember that acronym. And a study of aging, one of the world's most comprehensive longitudinal studies of Alzheimer's disease, and has authored more than 550 scientific publications, and I think he deserves a big hand for that. I've only got 10. His pioneering work has advanced early diagnosis, prevention, and treatment strategies, particularly in the development of blood-based biomarkers. Deeply committed, Ralph is to community engagement. Professor Martins has worked closely with families, advocacy groups, and philanthropic partners to ensure that the research translates into meaningful outcomes. And I think that's very important. Because theory, there is an old saying that I'm reminded of, theory without practice is quackery, and practice without theory is sterile. But he's been able to combine the two. That's fantastic. Honored as an officer of the Order of Australia, he is widely regarded as a driving force in the global effort to make Alzheimer's a preventable and treatable condition. As I mentioned earlier, one of Professor Martin's significant discoveries involved identifying Alzheimer's-related blood-based proteins, and I think that was a tremendous breakthrough. That breakthrough offers the potential for a low-cost blood test for early detection, as we all head towards that direction, and bringing up one step closer to a world without Alzheimer's. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Today, Professor Martin leads Alzheimer's Research Australia through an extremely comprehensive research framework focusing on mitigating the devastating impact of Alzheimer's disease. Ladies and gentlemen, he's also professor and chair in aging and Alzheimer's disease, Edith Cowan University. Without further ado, please make welcome Professor Ralph Martins.
Well, thank you, Professor Charan, for those very, very kind words. And from my dear colleague, Professor Vicky Vass. I'd like to acknowledge all the distinguished guests today. Many names that I can't remember, but you all know who you are. But I particularly would like to also acknowledge John De Silva from the Portuguese Consulate. We have a lot of international collaboration, and we are hoping now to build a very strong relationship with Portugal. So that just shows the breadth of our collaborative programs to fighting Alzheimer's disease. I'm humbled by the very kind words, but it always takes a team to make a difference. And I have a wonderful team, not just in Professor Vicky Vass from ARA who support us, but also from many members of my team who work collaborative with me. One of them reminds me, he's been with me for 34 years. That gives you the depth of collaboration that we've had. And I wouldn't be here today without the support of ARA and many people in the community who supported us, the McCusker family in particular, who started off supporting us. And in more recent years, the Lions Alzheimer's Foundation. So we are indebted to the Lions Alzheimer's Foundation, who played a major role in getting us state-of-the-art equipment, because without that, we can't do this cutting-edge research. I'm going to talk today to you about, give you some background on Alzheimer's for those of you who are not familiar with the disease, share with you our vision for getting a blood test for Alzheimer's and how we've traveled. It's going to be a bit technical at times, but I'll try to minimize that technical thing. But I think it's important to see that we're not just talking the talk, we're actually doing stuff that's going to make a difference. I'm going to then talk about prevention of Alzheimer's and how that now is becoming a reality. The findings from the United States has just come out 2 months ago. And our own work here in Australia, AusArrow. And right at the end, I want to talk about looking at other members of our community. So our first study was based on Caucasian Australians. We only had about 20 people from other backgrounds. This coming study is going to be of people of ethnic backgrounds, and the focus is going to be on Chinese, Indians, and Burmese in Western Australia. So that's in a nutshell what I'm going to be talking to you about. So everyone is aware that we have a major issue with the numbers of people who get Alzheimer's. So I call it a tsunami. We've got 5 million new cases every year. And that figure is just going to increase unless we have an effective means of treating the disease and or preventing it. And I think prevention is going to be the key factor. On your right are examples of people who have had Alzheimer's in the past. And what you can see there is people are from all walks of life. And the lady on top, and I'll talk about it a little later, Lorinda Clarick, she was 29 when she was diagnosed with the disease. So that's an aggressive form of Alzheimer's, but you will all recognize our own Hazel Hawke. Her sister had Alzheimer's as well from WA. That shows this genetic link that's very important. And there are others like Ronald Reagan. One of the points to note is age is a major risk factor for Alzheimer's. So sadly, the older we get, the higher the risk. And on the figure on the top, people who are 85 years and plus, about half of them basically have developed Alzheimer's. But I always like to look at the other side of the coin. The other 85%, 50% don't get it. What's so special about them? And that's what we've been focusing our attention. What are the protective factors? That figure at the bottom was done by a very prominent professor, Tony Jom, many, many years ago. And he predicted that by 2025, the figures would be 225,000 people in Australia. It's now close to 500,000, exceeding it. So it was grossly underestimated. So that's just telling you how severe the problem is. And these are some key facts. And I think even though I said that aging is a major risk factor, it's not a normal part. Dementia is not a normal part of aging. We also have been talking that it's the second leading cause of death in Australia, but I stand corrected because Professor Vass told me that last week it's changed to being the number one factor, not just in women, but in men as well. Now, we've heard about dementia, and I always get this question, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? And dementia is a global term. It means loss of mind. And there are many ways, unfortunately, how we can lose our mind as we get older. Alzheimer's is by far the most common form of dementia and is defined by a particular protein that builds up in our brains. And I'll talk to you a bit more about Alzheimer's. But these other ones, like vascular dementia, the next largest cause of dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, we know very little about them. They're equally important. We need to pay attention to them. And some people get a combination of vascular dementia and Alzheimer's to make things even worse. Now, understanding Alzheimer's disease, we know that typically someone who's 65 years and older is what we call the sporadic form of Alzheimer's. People who get it younger, and we have neglected those people from 40 to 60 have what we call young onset Alzheimer's disease, and people who get it much earlier are what we call very early onset Alzheimer's disease. Also worth noting is that this gender difference is very important. It affects 2 women for every 1 man. And in the past, people said women live longer. That's the reason. That's not true. I'm only now starting to unravel what are the factors that put women at much higher risk. So this gentleman on your right is Alois Alzheimer, Dr. Alois Alzheimer. He was a psychiatrist, and he was also a neuropathologist. So his first patient was a lady called Augusta D., and she was only 51 years of age when she got dementia. Today we call that early onset dementia. We also know that she's got a genetic cause of Alzheimer's disease. We didn't know it then in 1907 when Dr. Alzheimer looked at her. She had behavioral problems, and many people think about memory loss when they think about dementia, but it's a lot more than that. There's confusion, there's unpredictable behavior, and the behavior is the hardest part to manage. But when she died, Dr. Alzheimer looked at her brain. And what he found was there were unusual structures in her brain. We call these ones on your left, they're called tangles. And they have a protein called tau. I won't be talking too much about tau except in the context of a blood biomarker test. There's amyloid around the blood vessels of the brain that leads to strokes and resulting in dementia. But the most common form is amyloid plaques. These are think of tiny little minute pebbles that build up in the brain, outside brain cells, and they lead to they trigger the start of Alzheimer's disease, for want of a better term. And so that was in 1907, And up to 1985, that's all what people knew. So if someone died, only after they were dead, they'd say they definitely had Alzheimer's by looking at these structures. And I was very fortunate in 1984 to join Professor Colin Masters' group. He was my mentor, he was my boss, and we only had a team of 3 of us. And we focused our attention on extracting the protein in that amyloid plaque, because we wanted to know the question, if we can identify the protein, then we've got a face to the monster, then we can target it. So that was 1984. And this is just a schematic to show you that that's the example for plaque, but they all interlink, so the tangles can form basic structures around the plaque, and the plaque can influence the tangles, and then the amyloid around the blood vessels also has a similar protein in it, similar to the plaque. So these two are related. This is totally unrelated. But we've isolated these structures, and we showed that the major protein that's present in them is a protein that's called beta amyloid. So everyone today has heard about beta amyloid in the Alzheimer field, and I liken beta amyloid to Alzheimer's what cholesterol is to heart disease. Everyone makes it in this room, but those who have elevated levels are the ones who get Alzheimer's disease, and for different reasons. So this is basically a cartoon that I made many years ago to show that beta amyloid levels, when they increase, they give us Alzheimer's disease, but they can increase for different reasons. So for example, on the top left there are particular genes that when you have a mutation in them, you definitely get Alzheimer's. So either mom or dad had Alzheimer's, they had that mutation. If they pass it on to the child will get it. I'll talk a bit more about that a little later. Then there's this genetic risk factor, ApoE. And there are many genetic risk factors for Alzheimer's. That's not the only one, but it's the most important one. It's the most powerful one. It accounts for half the people who get Alzheimer's. So that's a gene that we need to pay much more attention to. And then there are changes in hormones, particularly estrogen and testosterone. And we've been pioneering the work for testosterone. So as we get older, both estrogen comes down in menopause very rapidly. In men in andropause, testosterone goes down slowly. Both these hormones act as brakes to prevent the production of beta amyloid. The moment their levels fall, amyloid starts increasing. And some people believe that this is what explains why women are much higher risk than men, but it's one of many other factors. And finally, lifestyle factors. And this is an area that has been long ignored in Alzheimer's disease. So many of my colleagues in the eastern states did not want to know. So our team in Perth, we are the ones who pioneered looking at lifestyle, and I'll show you later on that lifestyle accounts for half the people who get Alzheimer's. So it's a very important factor that we need to consider. This is just an example of those people who get mutations early in life. This young lady, like I said, she was 29 when she got the disease. Clinically, she was expecting her third child, and she passed away at the age of 36. So that's very, very tragic. And these 2 young ladies are now young women, and we are trying our best through ARA to help give them the treatment to prevent that buildup of amyloid, which is already starting to go very rapidly. So we are hoping that we can break that cycle, but it's too early. And this is just a quick thing to indicate you the age of onset. So most of the members get it close to the age of 30. It's a common feature we see in most families. Now, I mentioned to you about testosterone. About 20 odd years ago, we were approached by the oncologists who were treating men for prostate cancer. And the treatment involves bringing testosterone down. They give them a drug, testosterone comes right down within a period of a few weeks, and their behavior changes. They become very moody, they become depressed, so the oncologist came to see us to say, could we give them some insight of what was going on? And what we found was that when that testosterone was brought down, as I mentioned earlier, amyloid went sky high. When we published this paper in a very prominent journal called JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, 20 years ago, no one believed us. They said, oh, that's not real. Till major studies were done at the major American institutes. They looked at 20,000 people, They looked at 30,000 people, and they all vindicated what we showed, that if your testosterone goes down, your memory declines. So as a result of that, we have now are conducting a testosterone clinical trial in men at this stage. But this is just to show you that when we looked at animals, if you castrate them, this is the CSF, this is the fluid around the brain, the amyloid goes up markedly. You give them the hormone, you bring it right down. Likewise in mice, you castrate them, you see this massive brown staining, that's all the amyloid building up in these mice. And with the testosterone, you reduce it. So this is giving us evidence that testosterone plays an important role. Drug companies don't want to know because they can't patent it. And that's why we've tried to do it through the foundation. Without the support of the foundation and the donors, we've been unable to do this kind of work. And this is just another description to indicate how important this hormone is. It blocks the production of amyloid. Like I said, it's a brake. It has an effect on another hormone called luteinizing hormone. In the old days, that was associated with reproduction in women. But that hormone goes up in Alzheimer's disease and has a negative impact on making amyloid. So it blocks that. It basically inhibits this enzyme or activates this enzyme that helps degrade the amyloid and also improves insulin resistance. So it's a very powerful hormone. And we also know it's very important for circulation. So these are all the reasons why we have been wanting to look at this hormone to see whether it can have a benefit, initially in men, but we also believe it has a benefit in women. Now, what about a cure for Alzheimer's disease? This has been the holy grail that we've all been trying to do something about. And for the last 40 years, drug companies have failed and failed and failed. And most people said amyloid is not important until this major finding that came out. This was a drug company that had a drug called Aduhelm. And what they used is they used an antibody that they could intravenously deliver. So the work was done 20 years ago in mice. They immunized mice with beta amyloid. The mice made antibodies to the amyloid, cleared the brain of amyloid. That was a powerful effect. Then they went into humans, so we call this active immunization. Unfortunately, there was side effects were so serious, many of them, and some people were succumbed to the treatment. So they had to stop, but then they revisited it and made more refined approaches to treating this disease by using passive immunization. So we give them an intravenous thing of an antibody that's selectively targeted, that doesn't cause those severe side effects that we saw previously. So this drug came out. This picture here just shows you we've gone now from being able to visualize amyloid after someone dies to visualizing amyloid in the brain during life. Now that's a huge step forward. And also before symptoms appear, and I'm going to show you some data on that. But what this slide shows you on your right there, this is the drug at 3 milligrams, 6 milligrams, 10 milligrams. You can see within a period of 18 months, the amyloid is cleaned out of the brain. This is a major hallmark. Like this has only happened in the last 5 to 6 years. And then it had a downstream effect. I mentioned to you about the protein called tau. So amyloid leads to tau. Tau gets highly phosphorylated. That's what causes the dementia. So that was also very exciting. This is a very boring slide in that there's so many different lines going through it. But what I want to share with you is that when someone is considered to be positive for Alzheimer's, they have this figure of 20 centiloids. And what you can see here, so there's the aducanumab is in the circles. It brings it down to very close to what we call the baseline. But there are two others, lecanemab, in these purple triangles. It goes almost down to 0. And another one called donanemab, which brings it also down to baseline. So those two are being the front runners now for Alzheimer's. The other one, aducanumab, unfortunately, the drug companies became greedy. They want to charge too much, and the drug was pulled off the market. And it wasn't as effective as these two new ones that came online. So the bottom line is now lecanemab is widely available throughout the Western world, throughout the world, except Australia and Canada. Really weird. It's been knocked back twice. However, donanemab is now available. I haven't got it here, but it's now available the last couple of months, and people have access. The problem is there's no coverage on PBS, so you've got to pay $30,000 plus for the treatment. So that's something we have to now address. I've been looking at Alzheimer's for the last 40 years, and one of the things I was very intrigued in noticing is that people can show changes, and it's usually self-described changes, where they say they have problems with their memory. And we've been following these people. So we have, at the ARA, the WA memory study, which has been going on now for over 20 years. And when we follow them for long enough periods of time, they start showing changes that lead to mild cognitive impairment. But the reason why we want to start here is this is where we believe we can get the greatest impact in treating people, if we can diagnose them accurately. So that was basically the work that we started with the WA memory study, and we went on to look at much more powerful bigger studies. This is belongs to ABLE. You heard Professor Charan talk about ABLE, the Australian Imaging Biomarkers and Lifestyle Study of Aging. We've been following several people for the last 20 odd years. And some of them were what we call healthy controls, like you and me in the audience. Some of us have MCI, mild cognitive impairment, and some of them had Alzheimer's disease. And what this approach showed is that if you do this brain imaging, we get it right 98% of the time. If one was to go to a clinician to be tested, they get it right 70% of the time. So that's a huge advance on accuracy. And when we look at people who've got mild cognitive impairment, so they haven't got dementia yet, but they're really making a lot of mistakes, so they're declining, we find that 2/3 of them will have amyloid in their brain. And what this tells us is we are now able to identify those people on the road to Alzheimer's. In the past, we couldn't distinguish between those who have amyloid and those who don't. We didn't have this method. But what was even more striking is in people who are healthy controls, 1/3 of them have amyloid in their brain and they don't know it. And it's bubbling away, and it takes a good 20 years before symptoms appear. So this now allows us to detect people much earlier. This is, again, another one of those boring slides, but in the old days, we'd use a cutoff of 1.5, a bit like in cholesterol, they use 4.5 or 5 millimolar for someone who's basically when they become positive. And what you see here is people can become positive, but it takes a good 20 years before they go from 1.5 to this figure of 2.33 before they have the symptoms of dementia. What this is telling us, that if we can identify people in this area, treatment's going to be the most effective. And this has been our mantra. So like I said, imaging the brain is great. You know, we can do this, but it's very expensive. It costs, you know, in Australia it costs $3,500, and that's in a research setting. If you go in a commercial setting, it's much more. In Singapore, it costs $10,000, so they just don't do it. Then you have this opportunity. You can take fluid from the spine. How many people in this room would want to have a CSF? Put your hands up. No one wants to do it. In Australia, definitely not, and most countries, they don't want to do it. So we wanted to look at blood biomarkers. And this is something I've been passionate about for the last 25 years before it was a reality. People said I was wasting my time. And because it's non-invasive, it's cheaper, you know, and so we want to focus on getting a diagnostic blood test. And what we've done is we've focused on proteins, and I mentioned to you about beta amyloid, that we can try to measure in the blood. Proteins that reflect inflammation of the brain, and inflammation is a very, very big deal in Alzheimer's, very early. Proteins that are associated with neurodegeneration. NFL, you might have heard about people who have accidents, sports accidents. NFL is what goes up. But your brain needs to really decline before NFL will go up. And then tau pathology. So these are proteins that reflect tau, and I'll talk a bit more about it later, but it reflects the amyloid buildup in our brain. And that's what's so exciting, and that's what I want to share with you quickly. And this all was possible by having access to this Simoa HDX. This is basically technology now coming abreast with our ideas. And again, very grateful to the Lions Alzheimer's Foundation. This is a $320,000 machine, only one in Western Australia, that has allowed us to ask the question, can we measure proteins from the brain and blood with accuracy, with great accuracy? And this allowed us to do this. We initially focused on GFAP. This is this protein to do with inflammation, the phosphorylated tau, and A-beta 40/42 and NFL to see what value they had. And the way we do our research is we look at what we call cohorts that are highly characterized. And this is the one we start off with. It's called the Carvier cohort. There were people from the Anglican retirement villages in Sydney, 100 of them. Everyone had their brain amyloid measured. And again, rather boring stuff, but what the important point to note is, we want to ask the question, people who've got amyloid in the brain versus who haven't got amyloid in the brain, can this blood test or GFAP distinguish between them? And as you can see, yes, it does. And if you follow them at 12 months, it's even more so. So that was very exciting, and not just for GFAP, it was for phospho-tau 231 and phospho-tau 181, but not for NFL. Why not for NFL? Because I mentioned to you the brain's got to be damaged before NFL levels will rise. So once Alzheimer's disease ensues, that's when NFL is going to be important. This is the Diane study, and I mentioned to you that young lady who got Alzheimer's disease early. She got it at 29. In Australia, we have about 30 of these families. They're not that many. And in order for us to get some better insight into the disease, we partnered with groups around the world, led by the US. So they have 7 sites in the US, 3 in Australia, 1 in the UK, and now many more coming in from Europe. Collectively, we had 400 families that we could look at. And what this allowed us to do is to be able to look at changes in the blood before the onset of symptoms, and we know when the symptoms are going to start, because if mom had it at the age of 31 or 32, the children will get it very close to that age of onset. And we call it the estimated time of onset in these people. And basically, if you look here, the red represents people who have the mutation. These are children of some people who have Alzheimer's disease. The blue are the children who don't have those mutations. And for this protein, phospho-tau 181, 20 years earlier, the protein starts increasing before any symptoms. Likewise, GFAP, the same story is the case. But NFL, as you can see, it's 12 years. So only when the brain starts getting damaged, NFL rises. So this is the most striking evidence to indicate that these blood proteins reflect changes in the brain very early in the disease. I'll just skip that, but this just correlates these changes with the brain pathology. So the more pathology you have, the higher these markers. And as the disease progresses, you can see the levels increase. So this is people who are well into Alzheimer's. And as you can see, the NFL levels now are markedly increased, which is what you'd expect. And this is our landmark study. This is our ABLE study that we talk about, that we wanted to ask 2 questions. Can we diagnose Alzheimer's during life? And does lifestyle matter? So the L in ABLE is lifestyle. I'll come to lifestyle a little later, but we were able to, and I showed you, we can do that by imaging the brain, but we're now asking the question, can we do it through the blood? Because that's going to be the way forward. And this is an example of A-beta 40/42 measures, 181, GFAP, NFL. And as you can see, and there's 3 different colors. So basically, we have people who have healthy controls in blue. The yellow is the MCI, and the red is Alzheimer's. And with this A-beta 40/40 ratio, the levels decrease in Alzheimer's as opposed to the other ones. With GFAP, you can see this massive rise in Alzheimer's, and it keeps rising. And in MCI and in NFL, it only starts rising once clinical Alzheimer's is present, and there's a massive increase. Likewise, phospho-tau increases in Alzheimer's and in MCI. So again, we're just trying to provide evidence that these markers matter. Now, what's happening out there? There are some drugs, there are some tests going to be made available in the near future. The one that's had the most attraction, but is not out yet, is this protein, a marker called plasma tau 217. And basically, this is the work that we have done. And what you can clearly see, you see a marked difference between people who've got phospho-tau in their blood who are A beta positive versus negative. So this is the Kavia cohort. And what we find here, a very busy slide, we use these ROC slides to determine sensitivity and specificity. So if we get a specificity above 90%, then we say that blood marker is going to be useful as a blood test. So that's the reason why it's very busy. And I could talk about some of the other markers, but the one that's standing out the best is this blue line here, is our phospho-tau 217. So it's very good for assessing brain amyloidosis for preclinical AD. And this is it, comparing different types of the disease. Again, looking in the ABLE cohort, we see the same benefit with this marker. And this is just to show us that if you compare it with the amyloid load in the brain, you see a very positive correlation with the cognitive control. So a very good early diagnostic marker, MCI, but AD is plateaus down. So this is telling us that it's not still good enough to cover the whole continuum of Alzheimer's disease. I'll skip that in the interest of time. We then wanted to ask the question, all right, we've got this great answer for 217 that's going to be utilized in most populations around the world. Does it apply to ethnic communities? Because very little work has been done on the ethnic communities. And so we were fortunate enough to be able to collaborate with our colleagues in Taiwan who sent us their blood samples, and Korea. And what you can see here with the 217, this is healthy controls, MCR 80, you see this very significant increase. And you can distinguish people who are normal as to those who are MCI, but we don't see this in the Taiwanese or the Korean. So this is clearly showing that you've got to be very careful when you look at different populations. And likewise, when we compare amyloid positive versus amyloid negative, you can see its rise in all three categories across the spectrum. We see a similar trend in the Taiwanese and in the Koreans, but what we also see a lot of false positives. So these are people who don't have amyloid in their brain, but yet they come up as positive. So it's another warning bell that this method may not be applicable to Asian communities. And this is just to tell you, again, like I said, the sensitivity and specificity for 217 is 90% and 93%. So that's really good, and we get cutoffs, and the cutoffs are 0.47 picograms. So that tells you anyone above 0.47, they are amyloid positive. But when you look at this figure here, you see that there are people in the amyloid negative, so because we know them because we've done amyloid brain scans on these people, there's a number of them that come out as positive, and so we miss them, or they'd fool us. And likewise, we see people who are amyloid positive, some of them are below that threshold. So even the predictive value is 94%, this is not foolproof. We have to be very careful about it, and the same applies to the Taiwanese. They have a very similar cutoff to the Australian population, but when we come to the Koreans, their cutoff is 0.76, so it's a pretty higher cutoff. So if we were to use the values we use for the Australian community, we'd identify people as being positive for Alzheimer's. Now there's another new protein that's come out. It reflects the tau building up in the brain, and when we compare it against the ABLE versus Taiwanese versus Korean, we see virtually no effect on the Taiwanese and Korean. Another example why these blood tests need to be tailored for other communities. And as you can see here, we see significant differences across the different sub-cohorts. In the ABLE cohort, there's nothing in Taiwan and Korean. So bottom line, BD tau is going to be a good marker for Caucasians, and it's going to be a marker for progression of the disease. So it's going to be very important. But for Alzheimer's in ethnic communities, we need to do a lot more work to see whether it can be useful. So the most important point to take home here is that from our own studies, even though p-tau 217 is looking very good overall, it's going to be coming out by companies like Roche are we going to put it out there? It's not sufficient. We believe we need to look at other markers, and GFAP may be the best marker to look at. This is a test that's offered by C2N Diagnostics in the US. So anyone in Australia can go and send a blood test to them. They charge you $1,500. It takes between 6 to 8 weeks before you get it. It's just not, it's just not right. So what we want to do is develop our own cost-effective blood test in Australia that will have benefits for groups all around the world, if we can achieve this. Now, it's a nice dream for me to have. I was very lucky. The McCusker family funded us $100,000 to make our own antibodies. That's how we've started. So we call them Target 1, 2, 3, 4, but they're all different antibodies that we look at. But GFAP is one of our lead players that is coming out. And the plan is to look at it in combination. And this is an ongoing challenge. ARA has raised some funds for us, but we are limited by the funding that comes to make us go forward. This year, basically, is a thing that many of you may not have not seen, but it shows the spectrum of different changes in preclinical Alzheimer's disease. So A-beta-40 and plasma GFAP, I've mentioned, you go up very early and go all the way. 217 is here in this broken line. It starts relatively early, but it then plateaus off. And so our approach is to look at plasma GFAP and plasma phospho-tau 205. And this is what our team have been working on. This is Dr. Preeta Arce, who's here in the audience. She has been leading this work in collaboration with our colleagues, Professor Kai Bleno and Dr. Juan Lantera Rodriguez in Sweden. So she's taken the antibodies, gone to Sweden, and tried to develop these tests. And the first one was the phospho-tau 205, very busy slide. And you can see that this protein gets highly phosphorylated in Alzheimer's disease. And that leads to it becoming dysfunctional and leading to dementia. But we selectively targeted a particular form of tau that's phosphorylated called 205. And 205, for some reason, seems to be protective. It gets phosphorylated, but it's protective. So that's why we chose it in the first instance. And this is work done by Preeta and the team to show that this phospho-tau 205 has a protective effect in animal models. And this is, again, a busy slide, but the main point to note is that once we made the antibodies, we've got to prove that these antibodies are specific. They're hitting their target specifically, and that's basically what this is telling us. And when we've done PET analysis by the CSF approach, we see a very significant difference between people who are positive versus negative. So this is what's very exciting. And when we compare to people who have got plasma tau 181 or low tau, you see a similar relationship. So this is work that's ongoing. We're trying to develop a blood test for it. This is basically to show the levels are very high in the CSF, the fluid around the brain, but relatively low in the plasma. But we see a very nice correlation between 205 and this marker, 217. The next one is GFAP. So GFAP is this protein to do with inflammation, and inflammation starts 20 years before we have symptoms. And we think this is probably the best marker for looking at a blood test for Alzheimer's. There is a commercial form of GFAP that's available. There's questions as to how specific it is. I've mentioned to you how specificity is important, because we think it cross-reacts with another protein called NFL. We have selectively targeted this region of GFAP, which we call N-terminus, and that's unique. No one in the world has got it, and this enables us now to basically take this forward to develop a blood test. And what we are finding, again, this is just showing you that this is highly specific. I won't go into the technical details here, but what's very exciting is that we see a difference between CSF GFAP, between people who are positive and negative for beta amyloid, but we see an even more striking result in plasma GFAP that's not been shown before. We still don't understand why this works so differently to the commercial one, but it's a massive difference. It's what we call as a greater dynamic range, giving us greater sensitivity. That's the commercial GFAP. You know, I can just show you how it compares between the two, but it's much, much lower. what we've also shown is that when we look at the in-house GFAP, we get an accuracy of 85%. Remember I said if you get a 90%, then the test is worth doing. When we look at the commercial one, it's lower, it's 80%. When we look at a ratio between our GFAP and the commercial one, it's now close to 94%. And this has excited the major the companies, the diagnostic companies. So 2 of them now want to partner with us and help develop this antibody for a test. So this is our objective. We want to look at people who've got Alzheimer's, prodromal Alzheimer's disease for diagnosis, for preclinical AD risk, so people very early, and also for treatment monitoring. So when you treat people with the drug, the amyloid comes down, do these blood markers come down? Because then people don't need to go for regular PET scans to assess their treatment. So that's what we're hoping to do. I just want to quickly share with you some findings, because we haven't got time today to talk about retinal imaging. So the people in our team, particularly Dr. Eugene Hone and Dr. Perna Podell, who are looking at the eye. And we see that the eye reflects what's happening in the brain. We know that there's been evidence indicating that amyloid builds up at the back of the eye, called the retina, that basically reflects amyloid in the brain. And we've looked at structures in the eye, and it has very similar structures to the neural tissue, for want of a better word. And again, we've been very fortunate. The Alliance Alzheimer's Foundation has funded us with a state-of-the-art machine, only one in Western Australia as well, it's called hyperspectral imaging. So we look at different wavelengths of light to identify if we can see changes in the retina that reflect changes in the brain. And this work has been demonstrated. That's the machine there. We published it last year. So this is a very exciting area. The Americans now want to partner with us to take this further, because this is non-invasive. We don't need to put anything into the eye to get this result, and we can do it remotely to help people in remote communities. Just want to acknowledge all our team. Prita Arce has done the blood biomarker work. Steve is also working with Kevin Tadai, and then Eugene Hone and Perna have been doing the eye work, and all our collaborators that have contributed to this program. But I think the most important people we want to recognize are our participants and our volunteers. Without them, we couldn't get any of these results that I'm sharing with you there. Many of them have stayed with us for over 20 years to help build this program. How am I doing for time? About time. Okay, so I'm going to skip a lot of this, but what I want to get across to you is that prevention matters. And I'm going to skip that, but this is just showing that there's a gender difference, more women. Dementia is number 1 among women. In men, it's coronary heart disease, but that's also changing. This is just to quickly tell you that some parts of the world, the risk is super high. So in the Middle East, North Africa, Mongolia, the risk is super high, like 30 times more higher than the rest of the world. And they are the socioeconomically poorer countries where drug treatments are not going to be affordable. Prevention has to be the way forward with these ones. And this is basically to tell you that this was published last year. It was a revised version to show these are all the risk factors that contribute to Alzheimer's. So less education in early life, hearing loss, high cholesterol, depression. But this applies to the Caucasian communities, not to all communities. And what's becoming very clear is that for other communities, such as the Middle East and North Africa, diabetes is their major target. Cholesterol is next. Depression just doesn't come on their scale. That has an effect. So we've got to be careful here again. What are the major risk factors in populations that we are looking at? I'm going to skip all that in the interest of time to just let you know that there's a worldwide program. That slide says 45. There's 71 countries around the world that are undertaking it's what we call a multi-domain approach for the prevention of Alzheimer's. And I'm rushing through a slide, but this is just to tell you that this finding came out from the US. It came out in July this year at the International Congress, where they had people on this 2-year program. Either they were structured or they were given interventions like self-guided intervention. Both groups improved, but the structure group showed even greater improvement. So this is very exciting, and we hope the same thing will apply to Australia. Our study hopefully will be finished by the end of next year. This is the study that we are conducting. But what I want to share with you at the very end, diet matters. We talk about the mind diet. That really is going to be the most powerful resource to bear in mind. And leafy green vegetables, all to do with plant-based foods, is going to be most beneficial. Now, I just want to let you know that we are going to start a study next year. If we get the funding, we already have incredible support from ARA and from the Lions Alzheimer's Foundation to look at ethnic communities. And so this is called Oz-Arrow Echo. We will be focusing on looking at, can this multi-domain lifestyle intervention improve cognition and prevent the risk of dementia in these cohorts? So similar kind of objectives that we had for Oz-Arrow. And we want to have secondary aims to look at improved blood pressure, their lipid profiles, biomarkers. We are, for the first time, looking at the cost to see how deliverable this is to the community. And we'll be recruiting Chinese, Indian, and Burmese that we'll be focusing on. So if any of you in this group are interested, and I end there, that are interested, please contact, you can either contact Sharon or contact ARA. You can put your names down earlier. There is a screening process, but you could put your names down and even give a blood sample. Because what I want to do as a starting point is to find out what are the blood cutoffs for our Indian and Chinese communities before we even do the trial. So you can join our memory study if you choose to. I had other slides, but they're gone. But oh yeah, there they are. That's Samantha Gardner is the person to contact, but you can contact ARA directly. I also want to be cheeky to let you know that this book, Maggie's Recipe for Life, has a lot of information there for what's good for your brain, what food is good for your brain. It's basically focusing on the mind diet and other related projects. So you can get that as well. And then there's this Dancing with Emotions. We're going to give copies shortly to the Baha'i community. That is the hand of my beautiful granddaughter who was 16 months. You might have heard her making a noise there. She wanted to see a world without Alzheimer's. Her great-grandfather had Alzheimer's. Her grandma had Alzheimer's. Her aunts had Alzheimer's. This is an example how the disease is so pervasive in some families. So, and this book was written by Sally Yule in collaboration with me and Maggie Beer to really get young children involved, to make them aware and make a difference. So it's available. So with that, I think I'll stop there. And thank you for your attention.
Just stay here because we're going to ask for some questions,
Sure,
if it's
certainly,
okay.
certainly.
That was fascinating, wasn't it? So interesting, and thank you so much for all those insights. I must say, as a general practitioner in the community, I'm super excited about the upcoming changes that will hopefully help our patients as well. We have a few minutes, friends, for some questions, and I'm wondering if anybody would like to address some questions now that we have Professor Martin, such a leading world expert. I see Dwayne in the back. Would you like to ask a question, Dwayne?
How is AI intersecting with your research? Are there new techniques that you're exploring to rely on AI to accelerate or move in new directions?
That's a great question. We are already looking at AI for the retinal imaging work. We're collaborating with groups in the UK. Because even though I show you those pretty pictures, it's very complex to interpret and to integrate. And we've also started a collaboration with Monash University, who have got great expertise in AI for the blood biomarkers. So with the idea that we've published so much on these different blood biomarkers, can we integrate them all? And we need something like AI for that purpose. So yes, it has a future in our work.
Yes, Mrs. Kehani. Just wait for the microphone if you can.
The side effect the medication you are taking for the lowering the cholesterol, is it affect the Alzheimer?
So we're talking about the anti-amyloid treatment or anti-cholesterol treatment?
The cholesterol treatment medications.
So there's been some disagreement among some of the specialists. They think that cholesterol lowering is bad for you, but the overall evidence is that cholesterol, keeping your cholesterol down, statins is protective. So your GP would be very unhappy if you went off your statins. So the evidence is very strong that it's protective.
Sorry, I just had a question about your study that was with the amyloid with the Caucasian cohorts. Was it also studied in relation to gender? Was there a difference between the male and females in that study?
That's a very good question. We didn't see differences with respect to the amyloid or the blood work, but we are still investigating. There may be other more novel blood biomarkers that may distinguish between the two. But with our current ones that we investigated, we don't see a gender difference.
I thank you for your very enlightening presentation. I just want to ask, how much does exercise prevent, how much does it prevents the dementia, for example? Because exercise does a lot of things. I'm type 2 diabetic, but I'm not insulin based. But using exercise, I can control the amount of HbA in my blood system. I don't need that much insulin in my system. Would that help my progress to dementia, for example? Because my mother is a near frontal lobe dementia.
So your question is so pertinent, and unfortunately I apologize because I was rushing towards the end. I didn't give exercise. So we have the approach we're using for the prevention of Alzheimer's, the multi-domain approach for the prevention of Alzheimer's. It includes diet and exercise and what we call computerized brain training. Exercise is hugely important, and not just aerobic exercise, but also anaerobic exercise, weight-bearing exercise. And what has been shown, what's been published previously, is the areas of our brain to do with memory and learning, the hippocampus. If you exercise regularly, you keep that nice and juicy. So that I can tell people, if anything, to motivate us to keep it. Because one of the first symptoms is memory loss in most people. And it's that short-term memory loss. So if anything you can do to keep your hippocampus healthy, and exercise definitely is a key feature to do that.
Thank you. My question is in relation to the research that you're planning to embark on with the ethnic communities.
Yes.
What's the age cohort that you're targeting for the research?
So it's from 55 to 90. So that's the age group. We're hoping to do it differently. We had about 20 people in our Australian Arrow trial, which was like 99% Caucasian. And we got feedback from them. Like they said, some of there was not enough vegetarian food, for example, in the recipes that were given. So we are trying to tailor it to meet those expectations and requirements. And we are also going to employ people of Chinese descent, Indian descent, to engage with those communities. Language is a problem with some of the Chinese community, so we have some of our tests in Chinese. So we're looking at many ways in which we can tailor it to meet their needs.
Just a simple question. You mentioned about computerized training the brain.
Yes.
And you also mentioned about getting that, whatever that stuff is called, the whatever it is.
Hippocampus.
Yeah, that to continue the learning phases of that. Can you give examples of that, please?
Examples of?
Of the learning and the computerized training of the brain.
So what do you mean by examples?
Like you say, we got exercise, we got food, and the third one you mentioned was keep the brain.
So basically it's a computerized program.
Is it reading lots of books? Is it playing?
No. It's computerized, and there's a series of questions that get increasingly more difficult. So the challenging part is that some people find it too difficult and they stop doing it. But those who keep with it, it really has a significant impact. So, and you've got to be careful which brain training program you do. So I always say to people, if you're looking at a brain training program, look and check if they've had clinical trials. So I wouldn't recommend Luminosity. They have the greatest marketing, but they don't have any clinical trials. So yeah, but it's definitely worth doing. We did it independently on our Perth cohorts, and we show the benefit there, and together with exercise. So we encourage people to use it if they can, and we're very happy to give people advice if they want to know more.
I have two more questions. Sorry, there was one lady here and one gentleman there, and then we might need to wrap it up and have questions over socials afterwards. So just.
Thank you, Professor. My question is more, actually I have two questions. The first question is, you said it's a neurodegenerative disorders and it's an aging degeneration. And again you said there is inflammation in the brain. Now my understanding is that if there is inflammation in the brain, the blood-brain barrier must be lost. So is this amyloid and tau protein which you are talking about is a part of the normal protein in the blood which leaks out and cause a problem? And the second question is, if you have drugs to clear amyloid and tau, when you give drugs and you see on a scan no amyloid, no tau, do these people recover complete recovery and they go back to their normal brains?
Very good questions. So let me go with the first one, because I've forgotten your first. But so the important thing to note that we haven't played up as much is that it's a great step forward. So getting rid of all the amyloid in their brain stabilizes them and buys them better quality of life for up to 2 to 3 years. So it's not a magic bullet. What we do believe, though, these are the indications now for people who already have symptoms, early stage symptoms. If people are going to be treated preclinically, and that's why a lot of our work is going to preclinical, we think then it'll push it back by 10 years. Those trials are happening as we speak. So we've got to watch this space. But there are other drugs, and I've focused on the anti-amyloid drugs, but I mentioned to you a few times about tau causing dementia. So in the familial Alzheimer cases, we're already now looking at a combination of the tau and the anti-amyloid. So it's going to get better and better, but this drug on its own is not sufficient for long-term benefit. But for those of us who have got families with Alzheimer's, 2 years or 3 years is still, we take it. But this is why prevention is going to be very important, looking at lifestyle, and a combination of the two may be the way forward.
We have been told that in strokes you cannot recover the neuronal damage. So this also is a neuronal damage which has happened with Alzheimer's. So do you think that neuronal damage can be repaired totally?
So very good question. With neuronal damage, it depends when. So if you get them at early stages, like I think I showed you that slide there, and I showed it to you that we're picking up 20 years earlier. And it takes a good 20 years before the damage starts happening. So you have time. So it's when in that period of time you get in is where the benefit's going to be most. So people who have early Alzheimer's disease, they've got some damage, and they're the ones where we don't think there's going to be a benefit more than 3 years. But each person is different, so we can't generalize, but that's the bottom line. So we've got to look at, and your point about looking at can we repair the brain, that's not beyond the realms of possibility. And we are currently working with a group in the United States whose drug appears to have a regenerative effect. So we're now looking at regenerative effects on the brain and also looking at markers of regeneration. So that's like synapses. You can get most brain-to-brain connectivity. Can we measure that? So there's a lot of hope, and I think in the last 5 years there's been very significant progress.
And my first question is a quick one. 1 second. You said it's an inflammatory disease.
Yes.
So we should know what causes inflammation and can prevent it to bring out all these problems. So are you aware of any factors?
Yeah, so I mentioned to you GFAP is one that we see in the blood. And we don't think it's because the brain, I mean, we're talking about preclinical. There's absolutely no symptoms whatsoever. So the blood-brain barrier is intact. So they've been released out of the brain because there's more being made in the brain that's coming into the blood. It's like passive flow. I didn't have time. I run out of time? Yeah. I didn't have time to talk about some other inflammatory factors that we've looked at. So there's something called the chiurin pathway. And when it gets mismetabolized, it basically has a buildup of particular compounds that damage the brain. And if you can inhibit those enzymes, we can protect that from happening. So we are looking at those inflammatory markers that can be targeted. The other very interesting thing that I again didn't have time to present is ferritin. So ferritin, when its levels are high, your risk of Alzheimer's is higher. So ferritin. And it reflects the buildup of iron in your brain. So too much iron in your brain is not a good thing. So, yeah. So that causes, so cause oxidative, exactly. So those are areas that can be targeted. Again, our research has been moving so fast towards diagnostics, we need to now revisit those areas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We might end the questions there, friends. Before my closing remarks, though, I would like to extend again a big thank you to Professor Martens, and I would also like to invite Dr. Charanjit Singh to come up and just also acknowledge and give a thank you to Professor Martens on behalf of the community as well. Thank you.
I think that's been extremely a mind-blowing presentation. I'm certainly going to be one of the candidates and enlist my name in the future testing as we head all towards that direction in our golden years. Professor Martin, from the very bottom of our hearts, as a token of our appreciation from the Multicultural Lions Club and the Baha'i Center, we would like to call upon, is Monica Cheng here? I think at the end of the day, there's nothing like a lady's touch to finish it. So on behalf of the West Australian Multicultural Lions Club, I'd like to call Monica Cheng to present, and the Baha'i Center to present to Professor Martin a token of our appreciation.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I found out what his favorite diet was, and that's going to decrease his amyloids as well. Now, the books that Professor Martin was talking about are here, and he has very kindly brought them along today to present it to the Baha'i Center. And so, Neda, you can be the recipient on behalf of the Baha'i Center.
Thank you very much.
So I'll now head back to Neda for your concluding remarks. Before you do that, once again, I'd like to, on behalf of the Multicultural Lions Club, thank all our volunteers who have been doing all the work behind the scene, jingling, and the rest of them. And your presence on a Sunday afternoon, on this crispy Sunday afternoon in WA. Thank you all for coming. And we can only move ahead under Professor's esteemed guidance, and hopefully we live longer without this terrible disease of Alzheimer's. And once again, two little words that mean a lot from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So today marks the last of these mental health forums for 2025. Please look out for next sessions in the new year as we embark on our 4th year of these series. You can follow the Baha'i community of Melville's other activities on Facebook and Instagram and be linked with a number of other initiatives, including an ethical business network and many other groups and events. If you would like to be connected to the activities of the Baha'i community or the WA Multicultural Lions Club, please reach out to myself or Dr. Singh during the break, and I'm sure we would be happy to connect you. There is also a table in the back that's been set up by the Alzheimer's Research Australia with some information on it and also a QR code if you want to link up with them. So please visit the table as well. Also, I believe the Baha'i Bookshop is open today. If you want to browse through, you just go out through the front foyer and to the right, and you're welcome to have a look through there as well. So today's refreshments were kindly brought to us by the WA Multicultural Lions Club, and we're very thankful for that. We would like to invite everybody to join us and have some refreshments and continue this really interesting conversation that we've started today, just to learn some more and to be in the presence of Professor Martins and maybe ask him some more questions if he's okay with it. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for your participation and to learn together. And in particular, thank you so much, Professor Martins. We really appreciate you.